hungry. We've been probably on information overload and going to sessions for the last few days, so I really appreciate you coming to join me and talk about my favorite thing, which is teaching music. So thank you so much. My name is Kathleen Amabile. I am from Scranton, Pennsylvania. I am the 5 through 12 band director in the Amabile School District, which is about an hour north of Scranton. Who is a fan of The Office in here? Yeah, okay, so that's all you need to know is that's where I'm from. I'm also an adjunct woodwind and music ed faculty member at the Park Summit University, which is the town where I live. I grew up in the Philadelphia suburbs, about 10 minutes away from the Philly Stadium, and then I moved up to Northeast PA in 2009 when I got my job at Elk Lake, and I've been there ever since. I am a Westchester University grad. And okay, awesome. Yeah, you're my people. You're right in front. I love that. They get the door prizes. Okay. I also have master's degrees from Wilkes University and Messiah University. We're in Messiah people. Yeah, thank you for coming. Okay. So, thank you again for being here. I really appreciate it. All right, why am I here today? I love teaching music. It's the greatest job in the world. I've been doing it for 15 years, and I'll do it until they tell me I can't do it anymore because I'm too old, and they drag me out of school. It's the best job ever. I've been fortunate to have a lot of really great mentor teachers, band directors, all the music educators I've worked with in my life have been fabulous, and they've helped me along the way, and it's really important for me to help inspire the next generation of music educators, because I would not be where I am today had I not had great people influencing me, and I hope to help influence the next generation of music teachers. So, we're going to talk a little bit about what to do before you graduate, some things about job interviews, what to do when you get a job. We're going to talk about all of those over the next hour. My handout, if you didn't get one, it is on the app as well as my slides, so you're welcome to follow along there. And if you somehow missed that afterwards, please feel free to email me and I'll be happy to send it to you. Okay, how many of you in here are younger undergrad, like first 2 years? Okay, who's older undergrad? Wow, okay. Who is about to student teach? Who just finished student teaching? And who's in the first year teaching? Okay, first 5 years maybe? All right, awesome. All of you, thank you so much for being here. Hopefully I'll have something to say that will apply to all of you at some point during the presentation. So first I want to talk about just a roadmap of things that you should do before you graduate. So the first thing you want to do is prepare your resume. I recommend find somebody who you look up to, ask them if you could have a copy of their resume, and then model it off of theirs. You want it to look good. Also, make sure you have all of your recommendation letters, fill out all your certification paperwork, and update your clearances so that way if anyone needs them, you just have them ready to go. Find opportunities for networking. You're here at the Midwest Clinic, which is the best place to network in music education, so you already understand the importance of that, so congratulations. You never know what door is going to open for you because of somebody that you met at a conference or at a guest conducting opportunity, things like that. So networking is very important. Get familiar with the job search sites in your state. I live in Pennsylvania. We have PA Reap and PA Educator. I have found that not all schools in the state use those websites, but it is important to know those and be familiar with them. I would imagine that probably every state in the U.S. has something like that, so just be familiar with where the job postings are and find out what openings might come up. So again, with networking, you might have met someone at a conference and then, a couple months down the road, they're like, hey, there's an opening in my district, send in an application for it, and that could be where you end up for your entire career, or just a season, but either way, you just never know. And have application packets and digital portfolios ready to go. When I graduated in 2009, it was before digital stuff had really taken over, so I used to drive around in my car with one of those big accordion files in the back seat, and I had all my clearances and my recommendation letters ready to go. So that way if somebody called me and told me about a job opportunity, I could very quickly put it into a manila envelope, send it off to a school district. But now I would imagine most places probably have switched over to completely digital, but have everything ready to go so that way you don't miss out on an opportunity. All right, so the job search. Who's looking for jobs right now? All right, it's a fun time. All right, it can, should, and will feel like a full-time job. What I used to do when I was looking for positions is I would sit on the internet for a couple hours every afternoon, and I would dedicate that to my job search. What I would usually do is pick a certain county in Pennsylvania, and I would not only look on PA Reap and PA Educator, but I would go to every district within that county. I would go to their websites and look for job postings that might not, be on the PA Reap and Educator search websites. So I would do that a couple hours every day. It really did feel like a full-time job. And stay open-minded. Don't limit yourself to what you think is going to be your dream job or what you think is within your comfort zone. Because I'm going to be honest with you, in the first couple years of teaching, nothing is really your comfort zone, even if you think that it is. So I'll tell you that My example is I grew up in the Philadelphia area. I never had any interest in moving to like a rural Northeast PA type of situation, and that's where I ended up, and I'm still there today, 15 years later. And I, took a job teaching 5 through 8 band. It has evolved over the years, but you have to keep an open mind because I would imagine that, I know it's this way in Pennsylvania, so it's probably this way in a lot of the country, but there is a teacher shortage right now in a lot of states. A lot of people have left the field since COVID for various reasons. So I said it's kind of like a buyer's market right now. So that's I think that's gonna work in your favor as you're looking for positions, but keep an open mind, be willing to move, be willing to teach something that you might not think, you're like, I'm gonna be a high school band director, but maybe there's an elementary music position open in the district that you really wanna work for. Could be something to look after, you never know what'll turn into your dream job. And cross your T's and dot your I's. You never want to be tossed to the side of an applicant pile because of, something like misspellings on your resume or a missing recommendation letter. When you first graduate, you're probably not going to have all of the paperwork that you need right away. I know for me, I didn't get my diploma in the mail for about a month or two. Same thing with my Pennsylvania teaching certification. And that's totally fine. The school districts expect that, but just put a letter inside of your application file so that way the person who's reviewing the packets knows that, oh, okay, this is missing, but they will be here eventually. You just, a lot of times if there's a position open in a really big district, there might be a lot of applicants. Something as simple as, one piece of paper missing or a recommendation listed on a resume, that could get you tossed over to the side and you miss out on that opportunity. So you never want that to happen. All right, so the interview process. I love sitting on job interview committee, so I applied to 35 school districts when I graduated from college, and I only interviewed at 3. It was a different time back then. There was more people coming out of school looking for jobs, and there were jobs available. So I cast the net out pretty wide, but now in my district, I'm very fortunate that I usually sit on the interview committee for our district's hiring process every year, so I've done everything from music to phys ed to special ed to math, all of it, and it's a really important opportunity. If you ever find yourself in those shoes and you're able to participate in interviews, I would definitely do that. It's really interesting to see it from the other side. When you get called for a job interview, you want to make sure that you research the school or the district that you are going to be interviewing with ahead of time. In my district, we have a K through 6 building that's connected to a 7 through 12 building, and we also have the Career and Technology Center for our county on our campus as well. And when our applicants get to the administrative round, the head of the Career and Technology Center will ask applicants, even if it's for like an elementary math position, what do you know about our Career and Technology Center? And they're usually met with deer in headlights looks, and that tells the administrators all they need to know of, hey, this person really didn't do the work that they needed to learn about our school district. So you don't need to be like Wikipedia and spinning facts back at them, but you want to have a general working knowledge of the district. And keep in mind, you're interviewing as an employee of that district. I'm not going in, I'm Kat Amabile, the band director. I am interviewing as, hey, my name's Kat Amabile, and I have a degree in music ed, and I'm interviewing to hopefully teach in the Oak Lake School District. That's where I work. So that helps the interview committee understand that you're not just there just to talk about your content area and that's all you're thinking about. You want to be a part of their school and their culture and their family. What makes you stand out? What gives you leverage over the other applicants? Do you have multiple certifications? Can you coach a sport? If you're interviewing for an elementary position, would you be willing to help out with the high school marching band? Anything like that it's not going to hurt you. You want to make sure, even if it's something as small as, hey, I ran track in high school and I never did it after that, but I might be willing to help coach, tell them that, because those are things that are really important, especially in these days where we see less staff members in public schools than we used to. Actually, probably not just public schools, all school systems. They're looking for people that are pretty diversified and offer a lot of skills to help out their school. You'll probably hear the where do you see yourself in 5 years question. I have an aunt who I will reference several times in this presentation. She's a retired educator now and is also a school board member at a district in Pennsylvania, and what she told me was the way to answer that question is 3-pronged. As long as myself, the building, and the program are progressing, there would be no reason for me to ever leave. Because if you go into a job interview and they say, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And you're like right out of school and you have all these ideas of what you want to do. Well, I want to get a DMA in conducting, and I want to go overseas and do all these crazy things. And I'm not saying that's wrong. That's great if you want to do all those things, but if you're going into interview for like an elementary music position or a middle school band and you tell them that, they're gonna be like, this person doesn't want to stay here long term, and they're probably not gonna, they don't see you staying there long term, so that they're probably not gonna like that. So as long as myself, the district and the program are progressing, there would be no reason to ever leave. And you want to kind of think in that headspace as well. No one's ever saying that any job you take, especially your first one, needs to be where you stay for your entire career, but it's good to have that mentality of you're not just taking a job to pay bills for a year or go somewhere and get experience. You want to really become a part of that school. And also, above all else, be passionate about kids. That's what administrators want to see most of all. That's what you're there for, is to teach the students. So it's about being able to connect with kids. Excuse me. If an interview committee can see that you have the caring heart piece of you that is involved with being a teacher, we can teach you the rest of the things. We don't expect new teachers to have the answers to everything when they come in for job interviews. So if you can really get it across to those people across the table from you that you really care about kids and you care about teaching kids through music, that's what you want. That's what you want to show. And how you look on paper and who you are in person are two different things. So if you had a 4.0 GPA and you were first chair in the wind ensemble, that's awesome, and that's what you should be working to do in your undergrad years. You're paying a lot of money to go to these institutions to get a degree. You want to squeeze out every little bit of it that you can. But those things don't necessarily matter so much to an interview committee if they don't know music and they don't understand the world as much as you do. Like I said, I sit on interview committees a lot in my district for different subject areas. I know other schools in the area that when they do interviews for music positions, there might not be any music people on that interview committee because it just depends on the district and how schools handle things. So you want to make sure that when you go in there and you are, talking yourself up and explaining all the things that you're capable of doing, make sure you can explain it in all realms of how how you're going to work with students and all of your skills. Because if you just go in there and say, well, I had a 4.0 GPA and I was an all-state clarinet player and all that, that's not necessarily going to transfer over to somebody who doesn't know a whole lot about music. All right, so just some do-nots for the interview process. I brought a prop with me. I went to a restaurant called Fogo de Chão last night. It's a Brazilian steakhouse. Has anyone ever gone to one of those? Raise your hand. Yeah, that was my first experience doing that. So you put these cards in front of you. So like green if you want more meat, like red if you don't. So I wanted to use it as a prop, so that was fun. So here's my no thanks interview do-nots. I just was really excited about this. Thank you to the people also for Peak Performance Sports for treating us there last night. It was awesome. Do not be late. Make sure you allow more than enough time to get to the place where you need to go. When I went out to my interview in the district where I work, there was no cell phone reception up there. There was no GPS reception, none of that. Even now, 15 years later, I still cannot talk on the phone on my way home from school because there's no cell phone reception. I didn't even know that places in the world are still like that, but it is in Susquehanna County, Pennsylvania. So you don't want to be late, you know where you're going, but also you don't want to be too early either, because I don't know exactly what it is about it that drives us crazy, but when we do interviews at my school, and if there's like a whole line, somebody walks in an hour ahead of time and they're just awkwardly sitting in the office, it kind of puts pressure on us, and we feel like we have to move quicker to get people out the door. So I'd say come in about 10 minutes beforehand, unless you know that there's paperwork that they want you to fill out or anything like that. So don't be late, but don't be too early either. Don't be an over-talker. Like I said before, nobody expects you to have all of the answers to the questions. Don't be afraid to pause and think about something before you respond. When we bring people back in for second interviews, the very first question that our principal will ask the applicant is, would you go back and change any of the answers that you gave us yesterday? And a lot of times, they always have something that they will go back and change. So don't be afraid to stop and think. A lot of times, new teachers will kind of give the stock answers that you might have talked about in your practicums or things that you read in books, because that's the thing that you think you're supposed to say. And that's okay. But like I said, we don't expect you to know everything, so don't be afraid to think about it. And just don't overtalk. Also, bragging about prior accomplishments. There's a difference between explaining your skill set and what you can bring to the school and bragging. So it's kind of like a little bit of a subtle difference. Always, see if somebody will be willing to sit across the table from you and ask you mock interview questions when you're student teaching. If an administrator at the school where you're placed would be willing to maybe do something like that with you, that would be awesome. And really give you honest feedback on your answers and how you're coming across. And don't dress less than your best. I know in society we kind of have gone a little bit more in the casual end nowadays, and that's okay. And different districts have different priorities about how they feel about things, but I know when we interview, my principal always says, make me feel like you put 20 minutes of effort in. So it's always better to err on the side of overdressed rather than underdressed. Take some of that graduation money that you get, invest in a nice suit, and that can be your interview outfit. Then you can use it for concerts later on after you get a job. And name drop. Especially in music, we all know lots of people, and it can be really tempting to go in and say, well, I know so-and-so, or, I did this with this person or that. It's an immediate turn off, usually with name dropping, so just please keep that in mind. All right, congratulations, you got the job. Now what? Okay, so take a pause to enjoy the moment. It's a huge deal. When I got hired in 2009, I was like so excited. I got the phone call, I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm gonna have a job. I'm gonna be able to teach music to kids right out of school, and I'm gonna have health insurance, I'm gonna have a paycheck. This is awesome. And then about 3 minutes later, I kind of got slapped with a wave of reality, and I was like, oh my goodness, I have to move 2.5 hours away from home where I don't know anyone. I only have about $200 in my bank account that now has to last me about 8 weeks until I get my first paycheck. And it was really, I'm not gonna lie, it was a very bittersweet feeling. I was thrilled to be able to have the opportunity to teach music, but I was also terrified that I had to move from, suburban Philadelphia, city life, suburbia, up to the middle of nowhere. No, I did not know one person when I moved up there. I could not stress that enough. So I was excited, but it was very bittersweet. So if you find yourself in that situation, just know that that lady you listened to in the Midwest Clinic, she felt the same way. So it's okay. But some things you want to do before the first day, if you're able to. I got hired about 4 weeks out before school started. Sometimes you might get hired 2 days before band camp. You might get hired a week into the school year. You just never know. Things are crazy nowadays. But see if you're able to visit the school or classroom where you're going to be working. If the building administrator or department chairs or anyone from the department is willing to meet with you, that would be a great thing to do. Some things you might want to find out. What does your schedule look like? Is there a curriculum that you're expected to follow, or do you have some freedom? At my school, they give us a lot of freedom as to what we want to teach and how we want to teach it, which in year 15, I'm really thankful for that, but I will tell you in year 1, I just wanted somebody to tell me what to do. It was really hard to come up with all of that myself. What are the expectations for me and the program in this position, and is there a booster organization or a parent group there to help us? All right, so your first year. So this is a vintage photo, by the way. It's my very first Christmas concert in 2009, vintage. Okay. All right, close your eyes. Close your eyes. Imagine the vision of yourself in your own classroom and what that looks like. So what you think your dream job is going to be right now. There's no judgment, whatever you think. Okay. Open your eyes. All right. Which of these do we think is the most important? Curriculum, working with other adults, or kids? If you think it's curriculum, raise your hand. Working with other adults? Kids. Yes, okay, you guys get it, awesome. What a lot of new teachers tend to go towards is curriculum. And a lot of times I think we don't even realize as new teachers, I fell into that trap too. I don't even think you realize that you're doing it because you just spent 4 years in school learning all of this stuff about orals and theory and piano and music history. And I was a trumpet major, but I know how to play the flute because I took my methods classes, and that's awesome. But the kids are what come first. It's my favorite slide in the whole presentation. Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. So you go into your first year of teaching, you think you have an idea, and then reality hits us. So education has changed a lot. If you have educators in your family, maybe you come from a long line of them, things have changed a lot, especially in the last couple of years since COVID. But you want to prioritize things in the following order: kids, adults, and then curriculum. So you might think it would be kids, curriculum, and then adults. But as my administrator always says, those two are the top, and then curriculum. You can't get to number 3 without being able to handle 1 and 2. As one of my favorite quotes from my principal: take everything you know about educational theory and throw it out the window. And of course, we're being slightly funny about that, but it's great when you talk about all these things in your undergrad classes and you write papers on educational psychology and stuff like that, and then when you're in front of these students for real, it can feel totally different. All right, so kids are number 1. So you have to be passionate about your content. I don't think I've been a music teacher, a good music teacher who's not passionate about what we do. We have to be more passionate about kids and how we're going to reach them. And I'm sure you might have heard this before, but they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. The example I give with this was in my first year of teaching. I have a student working with me who's a 5th grade clarinet player. The kid could barely put the instrument together, and I'm over here talking to him about my senior recital and showing him my senior recital videos and thinking it's going to motivate them to practice and do better, and that didn't work. So these things I'm telling you about, most of them are mistakes that I have made myself when I first started teaching. So kids really have to understand that you are invested in them and who they are as people, rather than just what they're going to be able to do for you musically. So you have to take a vested interest in each kid individually. So when the bell rings and the students are coming into your room, stand by the door, say hello to every kid. I try to ask every kid individually something about their day. How was your basketball game last night? How was your 4-H show? Hey, I love your haircut, whatever it is. So that each kid knows that I care about them and who they are. And students are incredibly perceptive and they will match your energy, so that goes both ways. So if you come in and you're super excited and you are full of life and you are just so excited to be there to teach them music, and you really care about them, and you're making them feel good, they're totally gonna feel that, and they're gonna match that energy and give that back to you. But also the other way too. If you go in and you're like, hey, this is my 8 to 3 job and I'm out the door the minute the bell rings and I don't want to do anything extra, they're gonna see that too. So just keep that in mind. And if you're nervous or scared, they'll sniff that out. They're kind of like dogs. They're like, yo, I can sense it. I can sense it. But it's okay. Nobody expects you to be totally collected all the time, especially in the beginning. As long as your heart's in the right place, you're doing what you need to do, that energy will come back. So now I'm going to show you the most flattering picture of me that's ever been taken. This is hot off the press from last week. That's my cartwheel story. So talking about matching energy. I had 2 students that were down working with me last week, beginning flute players, and if anyone has ever worked with beginners or if you ever find yourself in that situation, teaching beginning flute is really hard in the first couple months. It's really hard for little kids and where to put their fingers and how to make a sound. And I had 2 kids that were really struggle busing and they were kind of on the border of like wanting to quit, and I talked them out of it. I'm like, no, you gotta stick with it. And then they came in the next week and they were still really struggling. And I was like, look, we're trying to get D to C down. And I'm like, okay, we get D, C, B flat, and you can play hot cross buttons. By the time you walk out of here, I will do a cartwheel. And what do you know, like 25 minutes later, then they nailed it. So it's like bribery. So you gotta give them a lot of energy, but also bribery too. And so I did a cartwheel. Now, I'm 36 years old. I like to think I'm in reasonably good shape. I go to the gym a couple times a week, but I saw stars for about 25 minutes after that. And I was like, okay, we're gonna take pictures and I'm gonna talk about this next week when I go to Midwest. And then what do you know, I had to do a repeat performance the next day because then work got around and it was like, hey, if you come in, you play really well, Amabile's gonna do a cartwheel. So I did. Yeah, it works. That's my cartwheel story. Okay, now the picture's going away, never gonna be seen in public again. All right, how many of you had to write a teaching philosophy paper? Okay, that's great. You might have an idea of what your teaching philosophy, or you might not. Like, I never worked really in front of kids. So how do I know what my philosophy is? Your teaching philosophy is going to change over time, but some things I would, recommend that you think about as you're forming this in your head, not necessarily to write a paper, but just to think about in your head and how you go about your daily life teaching. Who are you as a person? And my aunt always says, I love this quote, who are you being while you're doing what you're doing? I'll say it again, because I didn't understand it when she first said it to me. Who are you being while you're doing what you're doing? Why do you want to teach? When I decided, I knew since I was 11 years old that I wanted to be a music teacher. But the funny thing was, until I went into college, I don't really know if I thought about it from like the student aspect. When I was like 16, I don't know if I was like, yeah, I can't wait to like work with kids. I was like, I'm gonna be a high school band director because I like wanted to be up in front and conducting and all that stuff. And some of you might have went into your undergrad feeling that way too, and that's completely fine. So I'm telling you that because I don't want you to feel bad. But why do you want to teach? I know the answer why I want to teach now is much different than it was, 15 years ago when I was in college. And do you truly believe that every child can learn and improve? Do you truly believe that? Because you have to be able to truly believe that every student can learn and improve under your guise, because you need to really believe that at your heart to be a great teacher. And how are you going to create an environment that ensures success? How are you going to be a champion for your kids every day? And this isn't always necessarily like to make them the best musicians possible. Sometimes it's just life stuff that you have to help them succeed with. I'm sure lots of, your professors will probably talk to you about that, your, field experiences when you're out there. How are you gonna make sure every kid succeeds and you be a part of that? And success looks different for every student. So no 2 kids are the same. So what works for one student isn't necessarily gonna work for somebody else. Okay, that's not my job. Who's ever heard somebody say that? That's not my job. That's not my job. Okay. Don't ever say that. Just take that out of your vocabulary now. You never want to say that if you're in a teaching situation in school. A significant portion of what you do during the day is not going to be part of your traditional job description. And a lot of times, some days, the music part feels like it's kind of far down the list because there might be some other things that take priority. Like I said, kids, adults, curriculum. So sometimes that music part is kind of low, depending on what's going on. And so it's best to avoid the mindset of, that's not my job, I'm not going to do that, that's not my job, that's the principal's job, that's the department head's job, that's the superintendent's job. Now, of course, if something is unsafe or truly not under the umbrella of what should be in your responsibilities, that's a different story. But you just don't want to live in that mindset. So, you're going to have non-instructional duties. I have parking lot duty 3 days a week. There's cafeteria duty, recess duty, all of the duties. Extracurricular clubs and contracts, like when you go into your interview, see, what are you interested in potentially being a part of, and keep your mind open once you do get hired. To go somewhere, like I said, there are more things that need to get done in schools than there are people to do them. So I have done things like be a class advisor several years, and planning trips, not for band, not for music, planning Virginia Beach trips for our seniors and running fundraisers, things that had no necessarily like a direct benefit on the music program, but it's helping the school overall. Those things are important as well. And then when I talked to my other music teacher friends in the area when I was putting this presentation together, and I said, what are some other hats that you have to wear as a music teacher that you didn't expect? And some things they came up with were taxi, banker, which by the way, you can't mess up money. I cannot stress that enough. You cannot mess up money anytime there's fundraisers or anything like that. You can't mess that up. Always make sure you're double, triple checking everything that you do. Chef, IT support, as younger professionals coming into a school system, most people are just going to assume that you know how a lot of this technology stuff works, so it would behoove you to get like a Google certification or to really understand how a lot of that stuff works, because not only it's better for you to be self-sufficient and be able to take care of a lot of that stuff yourself, but also a lot of your coworkers are probably going to need your help with that. Life coach, college admissions counselor, personal cheerleader. I am very fortunate that I have had 3 students in the last couple of years that have graduated from my program and gone on to Marywood University, which is right in our area in Scranton. One of them is sitting right here, right in front of me, so I'm really excited to have them here. But I have these students that have gone into music ed, and their parents are incredibly supportive of them, but they don't necessarily have music ed degrees themselves. So I kind of like to be in the front seat with them, kind of helping them look for scholarships and making sure they're getting, everything they need to get ready for their auditions. I will tell you, the area where I teach, there are not a lot of private teachers around, and also we're not in great proximity to be able, for our students to be able to go and take private lessons. So a lot of times, you might be the one helping your students directly get ready for their auditions for different things, whereas like when I was in school, the majority of that work was done with me and my private teacher rather than like myself and my director. Okay. All right, so common feelings, phases, and moods of new teachers. All right, so in the beginning, you're excited. You're right out of school. You're probably coming off of a great student teaching semester where maybe you had, I know for me, I had 2 amazing cooperating teachers. One of them is sitting right here in the front row. We're still very close 15 years later. I had a great experience. You're totally excited. You're like, I'm so prepared. I had a great time student teaching. I got all A's in my methods courses. I'm so prepared. Or maybe you don't feel that way, and that's okay too. And this is my favorite. I'm going to set the world on fire with my love of music, and you should feel that way. You absolutely should feel that way. Then you get in, you start teaching, the reality check. Oh my God, I have no idea what I'm doing. I thought I did. How come this lesson went really well when I was student teaching, and now I'm trying it in front of my own students and it's falling flat? I don't understand. Well, maybe when you were student teaching, you had your cooperating teacher in the back of the room that was kind of guiding you, helping you out, or the kids knew that they needed to behave because this is a student teacher. My director said this is how we're supposed to act, and we have somebody new in front of us. So it's going to be different when when it's your own experience. I'm so overwhelmed. That is very common, and I'm going to be honest, it doesn't really go away after your first year of teaching. Sometimes in year 15, I'm like, oh, there's so many things that have to be done. Because it's not just the music teaching. I think about when I did my very first activity when I was student teaching. It was a 3-minute part of a 3rd grade lesson, and I spent hours obsessing over that lesson plan. Because you have your templates that the university gives you that you're supposed to fill out. How many of you have spent a really, really long time writing like a 5-minute lesson plan? Yeah. And it might have been a 5-minute portion of one lesson, and now when you're the teacher, it's like 45-minute class periods, and there's like 10 of them in a day, and only like 1 of them is a prep period. So you're like, and it could be a different thing every class period. You can't be spending 3 hours times that many classes to write lesson plans. You'll never sleep. And then that's not even to talk about like field trip requests, transportation requests, all the forms that need to be filled out, all of that stuff. It can be very overwhelming. And this was the one that hit me the hardest in my first year of teaching. Why don't all of my students love music as much as I do? I came from a very large district where there were 2,000 kids in my high school. So our band program was like 125, 150 kids. It was way larger than even a graduating class in the school where I teach now. We have about 60 to 70 kids per graduating class where I am now. So I went right from high school where all of my friends they were all band and chorus kids. That was all I knew. And then I went to college, and just by nature of what an undergraduate program looks like, you're probably spending the majority of your time with music majors anyway, and that's completely fine. But I had, that's what I did. But I didn't really know a whole lot of people outside of the realm of music. So when I started teaching my own students, I'm like, well, wait a minute, what do you mean you don't take private lessons? Why don't you take your instruments home to practice. My mom forced me to practice every night. She like set the oven timer in the kitchen. I'd have to go upstairs to practice. And how come you don't see me like doing backflips over, playing your chromatic scale? I don't get this. It really hurt my feelings. So that's the reality check. And then, you might find yourself in a funk, and that's okay. Just don't live in that funk. Build up a village of people that are going to kind of help you when you're struggling or when you're doing well. You just need people in your corner all the time. Did I choose the right profession? I'm going to tell you, spoiler alert, yes, you did. This is the best place to be, teaching music. It is. But you might question yourself, and that's completely fine. Am I even making a difference, and do they like me? How many of you student taught high school? Okay, you might be like 21, 22. You're only a couple years older than some of these kids, and that's kind of awkward. You're like, oh, there's not really a huge age difference between us. So now when you're trying to be like the authority figure for these students, sometimes it can be kind of awkward, and then, and that might be student teaching, but then when you go and you're the teacher and you're the one in charge, sometimes new teachers struggle with classroom management because, I want them to like me, and I don't want them to like hate me because I didn't let them do something and now they quit, and it's like very anxiety inducing. But it is important that you have solid classroom management techniques because students will respond to your energy, but they're also going to respond to your management and your authority as well. So you want to make sure that you have that, on lock. And it's better to have the reins a little bit tighter in the beginning and loosen them up later than it is to start too loosey-goosey and then not be able to rein the kids back in later. So just remember that. And then the thing I always ask myself, can I just go back to college? Did anyone here ever see Avenue Q? You ever heard that song, I Wish I Could Go Back to College? That was like my theme song, my first year or two out of college. So, no, you can't go back. You can go for a master's, but you can't ever go back and do it again. All right, so just some things to remember. Every school has its quirks, so don't be scared off by the first imperfection that you see. And my mom always says, Kathleen, there's no utopic place of employment. So the perfect job doesn't exist. So no school is perfect. Even my district, I love my district. We're not perfect. Nobody is. We're all human beings. And don't be fooled necessarily by the school that has the best facilities or pays the highest. I know schools where, I might go there for a festival and they have absolutely beautiful rehearsal spaces, beautiful auditorium, but maybe the working conditions there aren't great. Maybe, people don't support music there. Maybe they have difficult administration. It kind of balances out, or maybe, it's an older building, maybe they don't have, the best facilities available, but they might have just the best administrators that you could ever find or the most supportive community. So you have to remember, not everything is always going to check off all the boxes, and not everything is always going to look picture perfect. And don't look for greener grass. Water the grass that you're standing on first to see. A lot of times, I remember even feeling this way when I first started teaching. If something doesn't go the way you want it to go, well, I'm just going to leave and go somewhere else. You might go somewhere else and something else might happen like that too, so you never know. And don't compare yourself too much to what's going on in other programs, because what you see, what somebody might be portraying, might only be part of what that experience is like in that teacher's life, not necessarily all of it, especially when people post things on social media. You're seeing the highlight reel, kind of not everything. And I always say, worry about your own four walls of your rehearsal space. I say, worry about the four walls of your own band room. It's okay to look at other people and see what they're doing just to get ideas, but don't live and die by what this person's doing 2 districts down, because no 2 school systems are exactly the same. And no matter if you're at a district for your entire career, 1 year or 5 years, you're always going to leave a program better than how you found it. So to make your mark, work the hardest that you can, leave something better than you found it. Focus on what is right in front of you. All right, so combating those feelings to avoid what we call survival mode. I remember one of the classroom management textbooks that our administration gave us in my first year of teaching. They talked about new teachers falling into what we call survival mode. And they were like, avoid saying that at all costs. Avoid thinking you're in survival mode. So that just always stuck with me, 15 years later. Don't try to be somebody else. Find your own voice. Maybe you came in after a teacher who had like a larger-than-life personality and did all kinds of crazy stuff, and everyone loved them. But maybe you're more quiet and reserved. That's completely fine. Don't try to be exactly like that person, because you are you. And it's okay to have people that you want to emulate, or you want to take little bits and pieces. Oh, I saw that person do that, and I want to be just like that when I rehearse a band. If they have a lot of energy, I want to have a lot of energy like them too. But don't try to copycat exactly how somebody else is, because you are you, and everyone's unique. And don't try to change too much in year 1, especially if you come in after a director that maybe was in a program for 30 years. They were kind of like a local celebrity and they were absolutely beloved. If they leave and you come in, right out of school, you're 22 years old, and you're like, I'm gonna change all of this because this is my program now, you're gonna be met with great resistance. So you wanna make your life not more difficult than it needs to be. So if you're coming in, I would recommend, the first year you kind of just learn about the program, what were the things that were done. Don't try to change really anything unless something, is like absolutely detrimental to students or not safe for them. But then you can kind of slowly start to change things as you make a program your own. I've heard that people say that it takes 3 to 5 years to make a program your own. I would argue sometimes it almost takes even longer than that, but don't come in and try to change everything right away. And your direction matters more than your speed. So we all want to be great music teachers. Like I said, you would not be here at this conference if you didn't want to be a great music teacher. But don't expect that you're going to know all the things there are to know after the first year. But as long as you're, taking your graduate classes and going to conferences and taking opportunities for professional development, that's the direction you want to go in rather than like, I'm going to have, my band play at, our state music conference at the end of my 5th year of teaching. Those goals are okay too, but just always try to be a little bit better every day, every week, every year. And be a problem solver. Like I talked about with IT stuff before, technology things, be able to kind of stand on your own 2 feet, but it's not just with that kind of stuff. Any sort of a problem, I always like to think, 3 steps ahead of everybody. I try to prevent forest fires rather than put them out. And a lot of times, if you need to go to an administrator with some sort of an issue, I recommend you have a solution when you go to them, so that way you're less likely to be dissatisfied with maybe an answer that somebody gives you. An example I use is during COVID. A lot of schools did not let band programs exist. Nope, can't play, it's just not safe. I looked at the aerosol studies that were published, I read them, I kind of interpreted the data, I made kind of a bullet point list. I went to my administrators and I said, okay, here's the issues, here's what the recommendations are, I think this is what we should do. And they were like, okay, that sounds good. Administrators and department chairs are really busy people. If you just dump problems onto their lap and expect them to solve them for you, you're not always gonna be happy with the answers that you get back. And administrators really like to see people that are quick to think on their feet and come up with, solutions on their own, and that helps them out, helps everybody. Keep detailed notes, whether it's a Google Doc. You can laugh at me for this, and this green light, you can laugh. I have a 45-minute commute each way to work. I talk to myself constantly, like I open voice memos on my phone and I record it because my brain moves faster than my fingers to write things down or to type things, so I'm gonna make sure I didn't say that backwards. So sometimes I just have to record things like, hey, when you get to school, don't forget to do this, or like an idea or something like that. I'll go back and listen to it later, delete it, and I'll, kind of do what I need to do. But that's how I, keep track of things. But it's important to keep notes on stuff because I know for myself, I don't always have the most accurate memory, so I might get through a type of a situation that was really stressful, but then if you ask me 6 months down the road, I'm like, oh, that wasn't so bad. And then the next, concert cycle comes along, and I'm like, oh, why is this so stressful? And my husband will be like, don't you remember last year you were kind of freaking out about that? So it's important to remember these things. Even sometimes now I'll even, after I go through something, whether it's hosting a festival or something like that, I'll even write down things that were stressful about this situation and ways to make it better next time, and then go back and review my notes. So I highly recommend that. I wish that was something I had done from the beginning, because actually for now, even more, probably just entertainment's sake, to go back and kind of laugh at some of the things from the beginning, but that is important. Also, have friends outside of music and teaching. It helps with perspective. Like I said, my whole high school experience and then going into undergrad, the majority of the people that I spent my time with were music people, and I love those people. And I'm not saying that that's wrong at all. You need to have that. I am married to somebody who is not an educator or a musician. My husband could not tell you where C is on the treble clef. He could not even tell you how to put a sound through any type of an instrument, but some of the best insights that I have had about teaching and life and all that have come from him, or people in my life that are not musicians or not teachers. So you just never know. It's nice to have that perspective outside of it, and to be involved with things outside of music, be part of something that's a little bit bigger than yourself. Also, still play in community groups and stay active on your instrument. Those things are important, of course, but don't be afraid to branch out and do some other things too, and just have hobbies. Musicians are kind of unique in the fact that, we started playing instruments when we were younger, we started singing, and that was like our hobby, so we decided to make it our life's work, and that's awesome. But, I don't know if nurses come home and study the periodic table all night, because they sign, maybe they do, I don't want to generalize, but, so our hobby is also kind of what we do all day long, but it's important to have hobbies outside. I recently got really into reading. I read 95 books this year. I'm hoping to read 5 more before I get to January 1st, and that was just something I needed to do, something that besides from music, just to perspective. It makes me a better teacher, I promise. Doing non-music things makes me a better music teacher. It's wild. Okay, so other common teacher traps and mistakes that I've noticed or things that I did that I think are worth mentioning. Over-programming, go easier at the start. So my friend Craig Snyder up here, who I student taught with 15 years ago, he told me in an email my first year of teaching, you probably don't even remember this, program way easier music than you think you're gonna need in your first concert cycle because you want it to sound really good and you want the kids to have a good experience. Do you remember that? Yeah. And that is probably one of the best pieces of advice that I've ever heard, because the other thing is too, especially as younger teachers, as you're getting experience and learning how students operate, you have to look at the music through the eyes of the age group that you're teaching. Because I know for me, I would look at a score, and I'm a clarinetist, so I would look at the clarinet part and I'd be like, oh, that's not too hard, that rhythm's not that bad. And then I would put it in front of kids and I'm like, why can't you play this? Because I wasn't thinking about it from like a 10-year-old perspective. And I'm not gonna lie, I still kind of make that mistake sometimes. I've been teaching for a while now. So think about it from that age group and how you might have perceived that when you were 10 years old. Like I'll see a kid, they'll ask me something about an accent or some type of an articulation. And I'm like, well, why are you worried about that? I'm just worried about the notes. Because in my head, I'm thinking, you know, notes and rhythms come first before anything else. And it's easy for me to just be like, well, ignore that. But a kid sees something over top of a note, and they're like, well, that looks different. I don't understand that. Cannot pass go. I don't get it. So just keep those things in mind. And I heard this quote recently, and it really stuck with me. Proper preparation prevents poor performance. So in the beginning, program way easier than what you think, because chances are what you think might be appropriate is probably going to be a little bit too hard in the beginning as you learn how kids work. And then also under planning and pacing. Pacing is a skill that is to be learned for new teachers, and it's not something that comes to you right away. So when you are planning lessons, whether it's for general music or a rehearsal, whatever it is, plan way more activities than you think you're going to have time for, because sometimes with pacing, you might go way slower than you think you're going, or you might speed through things. And what you never want to do is get 15 minutes from when the bell rings and now you're totally out of material and the kids are like climbing off of the ceiling. You have to like take a spatula and like kind of scrape them off. You don't want to do that, because then you get into classroom management issues, and admin has to get involved, and you don't want to be sitting in your room all the time to make sure you can manage kids. You just don't want that. So always plan way more activities than you think you're going to have time for. Ask a respected colleague to come in and observe you often. It might be kind of hard to hear, but the more comfortable you can be with constructive criticism from the start, the better off you're going to be. It can be uncomfortable, and sometimes I'm like, well, I don't want to hear that about myself. I want to hear that was awesome. But have somebody who you trust that will come in and watch you and give you the feedback you need to hear, and record yourself. So whether you do audio recordings, video recordings to go back and watch things, a lot of times in student teaching, your cooperating teachers might be doing that with you anyway, but continue that as you get, even when you don't have somebody supervising you 24/7 when you're teaching. It's a good idea to go back and record yourself, because how you perceive how you came across in rehearsal that day might not be how it actually came across to kids. And another big one, and I can't stress this enough, the lack of immersion in the school culture. So again, like I said, when you interview at the district, you're interviewing as an employee of that school, not necessarily as just the band director. And I know we've all heard the jokes about how the music teachers are off in their own corner of the building, and they never come out, they never talk to anybody. Show interest in things outside of the music room, chaperone dances, chaperone field trips, go to kids' basketball games. I know nothing about sports, and I mean, I did marching band for 8 years of my life, and I still really can't even tell you like what a first down is. It's kind of embarrassing, but I don't. But like, I'll go to my kids' games and I'll cheer them on, because that kind of stuff's important. And it is also too, that besides from them saying like, oh hey, there's my teacher, that's cool that they came to see me. It's really interesting to see how kids function in other activities outside of how they are when they're with you. So, and it shows them that you care. So just be, show interest in all those things. And also, and I cannot stress this enough, be supportive of the music program at all levels. So if you're the elementary person, go to the middle school and the high school concerts if you're able to. If you're the high school person, you better be down in those younger grade levels, and so those kids see your face. I know a lot of times high school directors might be like, well, that middle school person, they're not sending me enough kids. Well, do those kids know who you are? If you make yourself a regular presence down there, that's going to help you with recruitment, retention, all of those things. Now, in my case, I am the only director in my district 5 through 12, so I don't have anybody else that I have to manage, but it's important to be supportive of all aspects of that music program, because you all have to work together to make the program the best that it can be. And I'm not just talking about band, chorus, orchestra, general music, all of that. You want to work together in harmony as one big happy family. All right, so work-life balance. This is going to look different for everyone, and it's going to evolve over time as you go through different seasons in your life. When you are right out of college, most people aren't going to be married yet, you're not going to have kids. You know, you might have more time to be able to devote to work, and also in the beginning, you're not as experienced yet, you're still learning things, so the scales are going to tip a little bit more on that side. Then, you know, as you get older and life gets a little bit crazier, it might kind of even out a little bit, and it doesn't always stay the same, it will evolve. And it's not going to be the same, what somebody might consider a crazy workload, somebody else might be like, well, I thrive in that type of an environment, and that's okay, everyone's different. Create systems and routines to help maximize your time. Things that took me hours when I first started teaching, I might be able to get done in like, you know, 20 minutes now, like getting my band schedules ready for the next week and setting up the preset Google Classroom announcements and remind texts and all of that. That used to take me forever on Sundays. I would sit at my computer and do it. Now I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. On Tuesdays, I do my schedule for the following week. On Wednesdays, I post the announcements. On Thursday, I send them over to the elementary for the kids to have. I have systems now that I follow for that. So it almost becomes automatic, so I don't have to think about it. Now, in the beginning, it's a lot of trial and error. So you have to try things and make mistakes to go back and fix it, but just come up with really efficient systems. And something else I wanted to mention too, how many of you go on TikTok? Yeah, Instagram, okay, all that. And one thing I saw on the social media, the different platforms, was people say, only work your contract hours. Who's heard that? Yeah, only work your contract hours. You know, if something doesn't get done, you walk out the door at the end of the day. Don't ever work at home, don't write lesson plans, don't do this, don't check emails. And I understand the point of where people are trying to come from with that, especially, we know the band directors, music teachers, usually the first ones in the parking lot in the morning, the last ones to leave. So I understand the messaging of that. And I will say, when I have seen this on social media, it's not always music teachers, it's sometimes just teachers in general saying this. But the reason why I'm bringing this up is because we have a relatively new music teacher in our district, and she's young. And we were having a conversation about a year ago, and she was like, Kat, I see this on social media all the time. They say you only work your contract hours, but she's like, but I can't get it all done during the day. And then I go home and I'm stressed, and I hear all this messaging about like, I'm not supposed to be doing stuff when I'm at home, but then it stresses me out because I just don't have time. Exactly. As you're trying to create your systems and all of that, and you know, your procedures and how you get things done, that's gonna take some time. So I'm bringing this up because you don't wanna be a slave and live to your job and being at school all the time and not having a life, but don't feel bad if you're like, hey, I do have to go home and write some lesson plans. Maybe you're more comfortable going home and writing a lesson plan in your pajamas rather than sitting in your office and staying late to do it. And then as you progress and you get quicker with things, those things might not take as long. But the point of what I'm trying to say is you can't always walk out the door when the bell rings at the end of the day because there's just a lot of things that need to get done. So just want to bring that up. Don't live in school 24/7, but don't feel sometimes you're gonna have to put in extra work, and that's okay. Might make you less stress in the end. Okay, social media. So I just talked about this in TikTok and Instagram and all of that. So education is not 100% what you see on those social media apps. So like I said before, you might see somebody posting the highlight reel of, oh, my kids got first place at this, and I had 1 million kids make all state and all that. But there's also like the other side of everyone's job. Not everything's black and white, and not everything can be 100% roses all the time. So it's not the way you see people put on the internet, that's not always the way that it is. I know certain social media platforms tend to have different flavors of how things work. And just be careful of what you both post and consume. So what I always tell younger teachers is, if I can see a band director from California posting things about their program, that means that their administrators can see it, their kids are seeing it, showing up in their algorithms. Don't ever put anything out on the internet that you wouldn't want your boss to see, or your grandma, or your students' parents, or your students. I always say err on the side of, be professional, be positive. Don't, you always want to know what your district is okay and not okay with in terms of if you want to make content. I think that's great if you do, but you always want to make sure that you have it checked out with your boss and you're following all the rules that you need to follow. And please don't post videos of yourself crying when you have a bad day. When I said build a village, call me. If you want my cell phone number, I'll give you my cell phone number freely. Please don't post on the internet because, again, new teachers struggle with classroom management a lot. If it shows up in your student's algorithm that you're crying about how your kids, my kids don't respect me and I don't know what to do, that's not really going to help. So there's better coping strategies. Like I said, I'll give you my cell phone number, my email address is on the last slide. Build a village of people that you can contact. All right, and if you're looking at something on the internet and it makes you feel icky, just simply don't watch it. Block. Go to the next one. You don't need to watch it. Keep yourself mentally in check. All right. My aunt that I mentioned, she also said this to me, and it has always stuck with me over the years. Do you want to measure your career as 30 one-year short stories or as a 30-year masterpiece? No 2 years should look the same. Every year you should be getting a little bit better. I find that the longer I teach, the more I realize how much I don't know. That's kind of crazy. You would think the longer you teach, you're like, yeah, I know all the things. No, that's what I think is one of the things that makes music ed so awesome, is that you're never done learning, so it's not monotonous. There's always more things that you can learn, more things that you can get better at, especially now coming here the last few days. I'm like, oh wow, I gotta look into that, I gotta look into that, this is great, I saw a session on this. I wanna learn more about those things. So think of it as a blank canvas, and you're just adding a little bit to it each year, and then at the end of your 30 or your 35 years, a beautiful piece of artwork. So use the resources. You are living in an age where there is so much information available to you at just fingertips length. Take advantage of that. If you don't know something, find the answer. There's probably something on the internet. You know somebody, call, find the answer. Don't wallow in, well, I don't know how to do that. Use your resources. Always be focusing on getting better. Okay, so my first slide was why are we here today? I'm bringing it back at the end because all these pictures have one thing in common: kids. I love kids. I love teaching. It's the best job you could have, and it's an honor. The teachers do the most important work. We are helping little people understand how to be functional members of society, and we get to do that through music, which again, we all went into music because it was we were most passionate about that, one of the greatest things in our lives. So that's why I'm here today, because I love nothing more than teaching music to kids. All right, so thank you again so much for being here today. I really appreciate it. And I think I got like 5 minutes if anyone has any questions. Any questions? No? Yes?
So when you're like sitting on the interview board and they ask if the interview has what kind of questions do you want to ask them?
That is an excellent question. I was actually going to mention this. She asked, what if we say to the applicants, do you have any questions for us? If you have questions about, how many music teachers do you have in the program, in the overall department, or specific questions about the school, a lot of times people will ask questions like, what is your educational philosophy as a staff, or like something that they read on the internet, and it's really obvious that that's what it was. Sometimes I'm like, okay, Kat, don't roll your eyes. I don't know if that makes sense, but just I was trying to ask it as like a school-specific question. If there's something specifically about that job that you have a question about, don't ask about salary, sick time, personal days, nothing like that. But if you're like, hey, what does the rehearsal space look like? And am I going to be traveling between multiple rooms? Do I have one designated room? How many grade levels am I going to be working with? Stuff like that. But yeah, what are the 5 best things that you do as a district? Oh, just anything else? Yes. Major red flags. And this might be a different answer depending on who you ask. For me, I will tell you, I have the best administrators that you will find in any school, and I could not work in a situation where I did not have the people that were, in charge of me if they were anything less than 110% supportive. So for me, that would be an instant red flag. Now, I know people who are really good at working with, administrators that might not be supportive, but for me, that would be like an immediate no, because I really value that in my job. Okay, that's a great question too. Yes?
What resources do you suggest for like professional development or growing after the start?
Great question. Conferences, especially this one. This is the best. Graduate courses. Oh my goodness. There's so much stuff on the internet now. Like I just think of websites like Band Directors Talk Shop, or the Facebook pages. There's just so much stuff out there. If you can find really good content on the social media apps, that's not just, hey, we're complaining about all the things. There's just so many things out there now, like or YouTube videos. Back in the day, if I didn't know how to take a stuck mouthpiece out of a trumpet, I had to go find someone that could show me how to do it. Now you just look it up and find a 2-minute video online. But yeah, yes.
If you could wrap up your experience teaching in maybe 1 to 2 sentences to tell someone, you have an elevator pitch and you have to give someone advice, what would you tell them?
Ooh, that's a good one. If I could wrap it up into 2 sentences. Oh my God, I have to think about that one for a while.
Oh, sorry.
No, I love this question. This is great. It's so much fun and it's incredibly rewarding. That's the best thing I can come up with right now. I'm going to think about that. Yes?
While exiting undergrad and waiting for resident work to come in, when would you recommend like submitting the applications?
Whenever you see openings come up, I would start looking at them ahead of time so you would know like, oh, hey, this district might have something coming up, or maybe I see this post on this website. You can always reach out to, like, a job posting is gonna have a contact person on it too. And like in our case, in our district, it's our superintendent secretary. I would tell someone looking at that job to please email that individual and ask them, hey, I'm missing my PA certification, but a lot of times whoever's in charge of that at the university will usually give you like a letter to put in your file saying like, hey, Joe Schmo doesn't have a certification paperwork yet, but it's in the works. Here's our official letter stating that like this person did actually graduate and we'll have this paper. Excellent question, yes.
Tied to your idea about standing out, I know you mentioned provide a resume. Is there anything else in your packet that you can provide that can stand out?
Resume, cover letter, recommendation letters. I know there's different opinions out there, like some administrators will tell you, I don't read recommendation letters, I don't have a lot of time to do that. I read them. I will. I'll look at transcripts, I'll look at, you know, and don't think, if I wasn't a straight A student in college, I graduated with honors, but like by the skin of my teeth. So please don't think like, hey, I got like a C in music theory and that means I'm gonna be a terrible teacher. No, don't think that. But I will look over those things. Some people won't, you know, but anything that you, like I said, multiple certifications, or like at one point I had a Google cert, Google level 1, I let it lapse, I'll get it back at some point, but just things like that to look. And a lot of times even, I want to make sure I say this correctly. In addition to showing that you have that skill, it shows me that you're somebody who takes initiative to learn things and to get better at stuff, rather than just like, oh, cool, they have STEM cert, or they have this or that. It's like, oh no, that's somebody who values education, who values like, you know, knowing things and being good at stuff. Great, yeah, these are great questions. Yes?
How do you spin the lack of experience into, I can still do this job?
The caring heart piece, as my principal says. So if we can see that you come in and you're really excited, you really care about students, we don't expect you to know all the stuff. Even with content things, that's why we assign mentor teachers to people. So if you're like, hey, I am just here and I am like down to work with kids and be like a super excitable, awesome teacher, and I'm gonna do all the things you tell me to do, and I'm gonna take notes, and if you ask me to jump, if you tell me to jump, I'm gonna ask how high. That's okay, we can teach you the rest of it. It's okay. Does that answer your question? Yeah, all right, awesome. Yes?
What are some ways that you prioritize your personal life or your family when you feel overwhelmed with your job or your job responsibilities?
Oh. Yeah, again, another excellent question. How do I prioritize the things outside of my job? You gotta remember what's most important in life, and if you're no good at home to the people who care about you the most, you're not gonna be any good when you're at work. So if I come home and I'm a nightmare to my husband, that's not gonna help me out when I'm at school. So sometimes you kind of have to take a step back and like, maybe I had a terrible day, or maybe like this kid just cannot understand how to play this song, or like, I don't understand why this person's not supporting my lesson schedule or this or that, but I can't take it out on the people that I care about the most, because remember, like if something God forbid should happen to you and you won't be, you can't go to your job the next day, they're gonna have to hire somebody to replace you, but you can't be replaced in your personal life. You can't be replaced at home. Yeah, awesome. Okay. Yes?
Do you have any recommendations like for resources how to not get like lowball on pay?
You know what? In the beginning, you got. I don't know. This is probably gonna be very direct, but you kind of just gotta like take the job that's offered to you. And like I said, I think you guys you're in a different generation now where like I said, it's a buyer's market, the applicant's market. There's probably a lot more openings right now than there are people looking for jobs. It's the opposite. But I know, like when I was looking for jobs, I applied to 35 school districts. I interviewed at 3. I was just happy that somebody offered me, the opportunity to teach there. And the fact that they were going to pay me and give me health insurance was like completely secondary. It was like I didn't even think about that. So when you're new and you're just looking for jobs, you're not really going to have a whole lot of leverage over things like salary or stuff like that.
Well,
At least in Pennsylvania, it could be different other places.
I asked, especially for like circumstances where you plan on jumping states.
Okay. Like if you were at one position, you were looking for another.
Yeah, like getting an idea like of the pay scales are wildly different if you go 2 states over.
Mm-hmm. Oh. I would say if you're still like in your, you know, your first couple years and you're leaving one position, you're going to another. Some districts, some places will match you at where you were, and some might put you back at step one. I've seen all sorts of things happen, and you kind of have to weigh out the options of how badly do you want that job? Are you willing to move forward? Are you willing to possibly take a pay cut? Other things you have to keep in mind too. In my district, if you, and it's like this in a lot of places, if you take graduate classes and then you go and leave within a certain amount of time, you might have to reimburse the district for all or part of that. So that's also something that you want to keep in mind. If I had 3 more hours, I would talk more about, like, you know, the life parts of being a new teacher, like finances and saving money and things like that. But that's something to, you know, to keep in mind too. If they're giving you money for, you know, things like graduate classes, and you know, you might, if you leave, there could be consequences for that. So just, you know, cross your T's, dot your I's, so you know what's going on with that. But yeah, anytime you're looking for a new position, even if you're past the first 5 years, you do have to weigh those options of, do I really want, you know, the pros and the cons? Do I really want this job? Am I willing to possibly relocate for it? And you know, if maybe they're going to offer me the same amount of money, maybe they're going to offer me more, maybe they're not. And what's, you know, what for me is most important. And again, that's different for everybody. So, okay, you guys are all awesome. Thank you so much for spending your time.